Thanks, guys. Thanks, Erbil.
All right, Lily.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being with us again. Maybe you can tell us about the story of PayFi. How did you come up with this term? I think people are curious about that. And it hasn't been that long since this whole PayFi movement started. What has changed since that day?
Sure. Well, at the end of 2023, I remember internally just talking about, hey guys, when we talk about DeFi, everyone's always talking about 100x perpetrating something, right? As if that's kind of like the apex of what we're supposed to be doing with blockchain and on-chain finance. And originally, I thought, why are we not building protocols, use cases, primitives, and products around settlement-based finance? So that's what I called it for a while. Because after all, the title of the white paper is peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? It doesn't say digital gold. It doesn't say 100x perpetrating meme coins. It says it's always been about P2P kind of and direct participation in a financial system by anyone who's on the internet. And so for a while, internally, I was talking about like settlement-based finance. I was like, what is that? Right? What does that actually mean? I was like, well, primitives around a payments layer and composable finance built on top of just a simple transaction, which is most likely to be a stablecoin, and around commerce rather than on trading, which is typically around speculating on tokens. And that settlement-based finance, as it turns out, didn't really resonate with a lot of people. So Raj said, he's like, well, I don't know what that is. You got to find a better name. So I thought about it for a few minutes. I was like, well, what about PayFi? And they're like, oh, that makes sense. So what is it? Well, I think that crypto's always been about, direct participation in financial systems if you're on the internet. And it's always been around. Now we have 5.5 billion people who have an internet connection, and those 5.5 billion people having access to financial rails and whatever one might do with money. And yes, it is true. Some of the things that people want to do with money is to speculate and to have fun and do all of the things that people are doing with that. But then also, the vast majority of how people use money is that they pay with it, right? And they're not sending a token in to get another token back. They're sending a token in order to settle goods and services, right? There's a vast majority of the economy. And the reason, so they're thinking, why is it that this doesn't exist in crypto today? And now you might laugh. I'm actually quite serious about this. The reason is because we didn't have Solana. You say, okay, well, of course you're going to say that, Lily. I would say I got involved in Solana because I thought we needed Solana to be able to deliver this, because you have to have three kind of basic things in order to actually be able to build a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. One is you have to have a performant network, because no one has the tolerance these days to participate in a payments network which has tremendous latency, right? We're just so used to, on your mobile app, everything is so instant and easy and has such a great user experience. No one is going to give that up just because it's blockchain decentralized, right? That's one. You have to have a performant, has to feel like fiber rather than a 56K modem. The second is that you actually have to have developer community, right? Because the whole value proposition of open source, decentralization, permissionless is that you can leverage the sort of crowdsource creativity, crowdsource development, crowdsource from developers, what are the things that need to be built around the world to solve some of these payments issues? So you have to have a developer community. And then third is you have to have liquidity in stablecoins. And as an industry, we didn't have those three things, even all at the same time in the industry up until recently. And there's nowhere else where you have all three of those things in one ecosystem. And so I kind of felt like last year was the first time we could actually start to address this. And to me, PayFi is things like, okay, well, everyone knows that stablecoins have a cost structure advantage, right? Instead of 1% to 3%, it is a fraction of a cent in order to send a payment. And so there's, and then if you look at Stripe, which is, depending on what product you use, sometimes over 200 bips, stablecoins, okay, well, now you can get that done for 1/10 of that cost. That's pretty good. But the other unlock I feel like you get in crypto is not just reducing the cost of those transactions, but being able to introduce a new profit pool off of the time that you save from 1 to 3 days to a fraction of a second, right? And so I thought that, the cost savings is clear to everyone, but the profit pool side of this is something you can only get with crypto, and that's where we started to collaborate on what Huma does.
Yes, and I mean that's has been the reason for us when we think about what kind of challenges we have gone through trying to build the initial versions of Huma outside of the Solana ecosystem, and then realize, okay, you need to really have all of these things together, right? You cannot just have one thing in terms of an efficient execution layer or just a stablecoin liquidity. You need to have all of those things together in one ecosystem to be able to really build these solutions at scale. So that has been an eye-opening experience, and that's why the Huma network has been growing so much faster since we deployed on the Solana network. And I want to touch on two things, as someone looking at the Solana ecosystem from the outside and where you're putting all your development efforts. Last year, you guys have deployed Solana Pay at large scale. PayPal launched their token on some of the new extension models that has been published by that team. And you started onboarding more and more large payments institutions on Solana. And recently, you also started looking at how to revolutionize the whole network to address better the needs of the internet capital markets. And you've been talking about this recently. And maybe you can tell us about what is this evolution looking like from the perspective of Solana Foundation? Where are you investing to actually really make this internet capital markets a reality, and where does PayFi fit in that vision?
So what we want to be, our focus is to now become the best place for capital. In the past, we wanted to be the best network, the best place for developers, and this is all additive, right? If you are not the best network, if you're not the best place for developers, then you can't get to the stage where you can actually attract capital and fulfill what I think crypto has always been about, which is global financial markets infrastructure. So as we think about becoming the best place for capital, what that means to me is that you have the full range of assets and all the ways to use those assets co-located in one place, one chain. So what is the range of assets? I think one way to characterize the range of assets is you could think about it as like a value versus price spectrum. And clearly on one end of the spectrum you have, and this is typically most crypto assets, are all about price and very little value, in some cases zero value, explicitly zero value. And there's a place for those assets, but I don't think that has been, or will be the entirety of what crypto is about. On the other end of the spectrum, you have, over the last 10 years, people have tokenized all sorts of assets, but typically in permissioned environments where they're sitting permission to the hilt, nobody to trade with, and no cash leg to trade against. And those are assets that have lots of value, but no price because there's literally no market around it. And that's also not great, right? So then if you think about those as being the bookends of the asset spectrum today, you want to fill in all the different asset classes. And some of those will be direct reflections of what you see on Wall Street. Some of those assets are going to be newly created assets that can only exist in crypto, right? So I think definitionally the market, or the total, like the TAM, if you will, of assets that will be on chain over the long term is definitionally larger than the $100 trillion of assets in the TradFi world. So that's one. So all of the assets, and then all the ways to use those assets. Well, fundamentally, if you have all those assets in just one shared liquidity layer that anyone can access if they're on the internet, well, then the way that people use money is anything from payments to speculative perp trading and all of the things in between. And so therefore, as a blockchain, we want to have the full diversity of those different applications and use cases available to people that want to do payments, right? And PayFi is a part of that. So, payments use case, very obvious to all. But then now off of a payments layer, which is a very different risk profile than, for example, speculative trading, there are unique, differentiated, and real world ways of getting yield off of those payments, right? So I see payments as being sort of on one end of the use case spectrum, and the other would be bookended by some of the highly speculative things that happen in crypto, and then the rest of it will get filled in. So that's what I think blockchain has always been here to do, which is to become this sort of unified capital layer of, I guess, humans. And that's going to be the full range of assets and the full range of ways to use those assets. And so I see PayFi is anchoring one end of that spectrum that is, I think, unique to kind of what we're doing within Solana.
That's awesome. And this wide spectrum of assets obviously can only exist in this new infrastructure because it, both from a cultural perspective, maybe it affords a wider spectrum of assets, if for nothing else, just for cultural reasons. And when you think about how we get there, because there are physical reasons, right, that we will get there, that the finance loves efficiency, money loves freedom, and people love the freedom of choice when it comes to utilizing different assets. We're seeing this with institutions as well. More institutions are jumping in to be able to utilize digital assets as well that are mostly represented on chain, because there's opportunity and money loves opportunity in some ways. And when you look at that as an inevitable end state, there's still long ways to go. What are the immediate blocks that we need to deal with? Is it like the mindset? Is it some liquidity aspects of it? Is it the regulatory aspect of it? Like, from your perspective, what are the immediate blocks that we have to overcome?
Sure. So I think that there are certain things you have to overcome in all of those different dimensions. And if I were to maybe talk to some of them, I think the regulatory ones, those are very clearly things that as an industry we need to have conversations about. If you have new infrastructure capabilities that can more efficiently fulfill the function that existing analog kind of constructs can do, we should have a conversation about that. Okay, so that's I think fairly self-evident, difficult but self-evident, and I think that really for this industry, sometimes I think that we just need to have a clarity of purpose almost. What is the purpose of blockchain? I think the entire thing has always been about DeFi. It has always been about taking the liquidity of 5.5 billion people and putting that in one place in the same way that we do that with information and content. And then the applications go filter that content, permission that content. Most of the applications we all use every day are actually permissioned. And the richness of that is to have sort of start off on the lowest layer of infrastructure to have max availability, right? And so we've on the internet unified the time attention of 5.5 billion people, and what is possible if you take the liquidity of 5.5 billion people and you put that into fundamentally the lowest level of shared environment. Well, I think that's really powerful. We have already seen how powerful that is. It's so crazy that you can take things where everyone shows up and saying white flag that's worth nothing, and then it's worth something. NFTs as well, worth nothing, JPEGs. Artificial scarcity, emotion, community, billions of dollars, right? And then not, but that is what is possible. And so how can we harness that in ways that are more sustainable, healthier, and more value added, and I think eventually where that's going to go is this whole sort of longer term direction of community-based capitalism. And people have been thinking about that, writing about that for a really long time. But I think it's premature to jump to that and talk about building these societies in the cloud if you don't have the economic infrastructure for that. So I see, myself, I've been in this space for over a decade and, kind of got into it because a lot of those longer term ideas, but I think you can't actually realize any of those things. They will always stay in white paper territory unless you have the shared economic infrastructure first.
I love it. I love the term. You guys are so great at this, terminologies. It's like every time I talk to you guys, you have this new ways of explaining something very complex in a very simple way. You said community-oriented, community-driven, community-based.
Community-based capitalism.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's great, because maybe a plug here. A few years ago when this whole meme coin craze started, I was trying to think about, in the history of the whole world, all humanity, what was the start of this? What was the start of this, community-based capitalism in a way? And some of the references I have found is fascinating. way back in the days, in ancient China, a lot of merchants were actually fed up with carrying silver coins or bronze coins or metal coins basically with them. And actually, it was one of the reasons why they couldn't bring their trade as far, because it would create a security issue, carrying too many bags of coins, but also it would make their carriages very heavy, and they wouldn't be able to survive that far. And they invented this piece of paper, and they said, okay, as the merchants in this network who do this trade on this route, we're going to trust each other, and we're going to exchange this paper that basically represents a note that we're giving this other person that they can use with another merchant on the same network. And this, the note started spreading in this trading network through merchants, and it became basically the driving force of the economic development of the era, because suddenly the secrets started to appear, because the merchants were actually going to way further, because they weren't necessarily needing to think about the security and everything of the bags of coins. And these merchants networks started basically sharing these notes with other merchant networks, and this whole thing started spreading. And it was fully decentralized, fully community based. But obviously, some of the dynasties who were controlling the territories around these trade routes decided that, there's probably some money to be made here, and we're going to ban every single merchant network from using these notes, and we're going to centralize this whole thing, and we're going to start publishing these notes with the stamp of the dynasty, and that's going to be the only formal note that people can use. And they started doing this. Merchants weren't allowed anymore to be able to use these notes, and the dynasty had their notes basically delivered to different merchant networks. They started using that, and obviously some smart people also realized that they don't need to actually print these things one-to-one in terms of what's backed up by the trade. They can just print these things and also use it to buy weapons, buy good for themselves, and they started printing these notes like crazy. And that was the first hyperinflation moment in the history of the world. That was a incredible economic crash and downturn, and it took many decades to actually recover from that. So it's really interesting to think about how we maybe haven't learned all of our lessons, but we're going back to this community-oriented, community-based capitalism. In terms of closing marks, Lily, you're sitting at this bird eye view of everything, and you're looking at PayFi, you're looking at internet capital markets, you're looking at every other thing that Solana is doing, but also with Accelerate, you're trying to really enhance the purview of how these technologies can be used and for what they can be used. Where do you see those breakthrough emerging use cases happening today? And maybe that can be the alpha for the audience, and we can end with that.
Well, I think with internet capital markets, I see that as being kind of targeted towards the middle of the asset spectrum, right? Equities are things that have value, and they can also command price, which is not necessarily true for all RWAs out there, because it has to do with the nature of the underlying asset. And I think what's really powerful about that is, I think technology, including blockchain, is always about expanding market access by organizing and monetizing long-tail supply and demand, right? Content creators and then content consumers. That was, in many ways, what happened with the internet. And I think that's also true here with, I think if you talk about the buy side and the sell side of economies, and what crypto is going to be able to do is extend buy-side access to investment assets, and then also, and this is a part that's talked about a lot less, expand sell-side access to capital markets as well. And I think that's quite powerful. So I think two examples here. One is on community-based capitalism. Why is it that Uber, who got the richest from Uber? Benchmark Capital did, right? After they didn't go public for 10 years and they went public. What about the first 100 drivers that, when it was just Uber Black? What did those guys get, right? They built the network and they got paid probably $19.50 an hour. And is that fair in a way? Yes, but is that fair in a way? No, right? Why is it that there's no mechanism for the first 100 and the first 1,000 drivers that actually built the network of Uber to get any upside whatsoever? And I think that's part of the inspiration as to why internet capital markets are interesting. And we have to figure out eventually what the mechanisms for that are, so on and so forth. But I think that's part of the inspiration for sort of buy-side access and where you can directly convert labor into capital, which is a translation function that does not exist in any scalable way in any major economy today. And then on the sell-side access, companies don't go public for 10 years, and who profits? Benchmark, Sequoia, Andreessen, love those guys, no issue with it, right? But what about the small medium company, small medium business that cannot afford to spend $10 million doing an IPO, right? Where is capital markets access for that entire swath of the economy in America to start with? Not even to mention rest of world. Why is it rational today that the best companies, let's talk about like China Internet, right, as another example of incredibly successful, innovative companies. The best Chinese internet companies, they wrap themselves in multi-levels of a variable interest entity structure to go public in America. How does this make sense, right? So the entire buy side of a country as large as China has moved to America, and the entire sell side of a country as innovative, as large, as deep, as wealthy, and all the rest of it as China has also moved to America. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
They actually moved right here to New York. They mostly list in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lily.
Thanks.
This has been great.